So staying true to the material, contacting your author and or rights holder. Neil talked about this in his earlier session about contacting your author, getting in touch with them. Hey, what do hey, I'm your narrator. I'm so excited to be reading your book. Even if you don't have any questions, just to introduce yourself and maybe say, do you have any thoughts about these characters? Is there anything I should know? Is this maybe a series if you feel like the book has ended and maybe it's not done yet? Is it a series? Are there going to be recurring characters? Just be really friendly. Let them know that you are out there. Once you get in dialogue with that author, it's going to give you a better sense of who they are as well as a writer, and it might even inform some of your narration.
Really quick, for Audible Studios, we mandate, if you get a book from us, Audible Studios, we mandate that you contact the author or whoever we have as contact, because I found that it comes back, if you don't contact them, it comes back to bite you somewhere down the line. Maybe not every book, but so we kind of blanket that. And you'll be surprised how many folks think, first of all, the authors sometimes don't even know that their books are being made into an audiobook. And then there's a whole door that opens up there where you get a ton of feedback on the characters, story arc, all of that kind of stuff. That's beneficial. And you may not have a question. You're just getting all of this from saying hi. And then the book becomes better, becomes a better performance, and you become better invested in the book, because now you have this relationship with the person who's slaved over every word, even if the book is terrible. I'm a big believer when we get corrections and people are saying, oh, well, it doesn't change the meaning, let it go. Someone slaved over every word, whether it's good or bad. You should respect that. So that's where I come from.
The other thing that occasionally happens when you contact an author is that you find somebody you really like, or maybe somebody whose book signing you're going to go to and you're going to meet them in person, and it's just going to make your experience that much richer. Maybe you get a new Facebook friend on your professional Facebook account. How to handle material you don't agree with. If it's something that really sticks in your craw, don't do it. Don't submit an audition. If a publisher offers it to you, respectfully turn it down. We have never looked poorly upon anyone for saying, you know what, that's not really my cup of tea, or I'm not comfortable with that, or that's just not in line with my beliefs. Absolutely fine, and I think that we would respect you even more for doing that and having the courage to say, this just isn't for me.
Yeah,
if it's something...
I'm sorry, there's no lists like this person won't do this now, that's it. Personally speaking, I totally respect someone who's saying, this is not in my wheelhouse, I don't like it. We have many folks that won't do any kind of erotica at all, or even have foul language of any kind, like damn, hell, or anything. And we know what to cast them on. They're great narrators, and we respect that. Why wouldn't we?
Yeah, going back to contacting authors, there are a couple authors that I've worked with that I've actually emailed them and asked them for an autographed copy of their book, and they were so flattered just to send it to me that it just increased our relationship. So
yeah, it's a good thing.
It's such a nice thing to have, and then when that person's writing more books further down the line, maybe they think of you and say, oh, that guy was really great. So it pays to not be a jerk.
A quick example of that is Scott Brick, once again. He's very prolific. Everyone probably knows the name, but he's a good friend of mine, but he's also a prolific narrator. He has a great relationship with Brad Meltzer, and now Meltzer writes kind of with his voice in mind to do this stuff. And he tags little difficult phrases just to piss Scott off. And it's true, but you could create that relationship, and that's a great thing because they both market the books, the sales are better, everything becomes better if you have that kind of...
But just sitting here, I just got an email from the guy I'm doing a book for that I've just barely begun, who's already starting to promote it.
Well, there you go.
And asking permission, do you mind if I do this? And I went, no, it means money for both of us.
That's correct, yeah, it's a good thing.
So back to material you don't agree with or you don't love. If it's something that you want to do, but maybe you're not comfortable putting it out there as I am Kat Lambrix narrating this book about women who love dinosaurs. Totally fine to pick a pseudonym. That lady knows exactly what I'm talking about. That was awesome, thank you. Many professional actors will have pseudonyms for a number of reasons. It's something you don't want your future kids to know that you've done, or maybe you work with children. The Acting with Emily that Scott stumbled over before, where I taught, was actually an acting school for young kids, and a lot of the actors that I worked with there who were teaching wouldn't maybe want their students' parents to Google them and find out that they've also done this erotica series. It's something that so many actors do. Don't be hesitant about it. Don't be embarrassed. Don't feel bad about it. Do take it seriously. You cannot be Lulu Vanderbilt Rockefeller III. That is no one's name. It's just not. So pick something that is a plausible name. But don't be afraid to approach a rights holder about it and just say, really excited to do your book. I separate my public personas. I'd like to do this under my pseudonym if that's okay with you. A lot of them are writing under pseudonyms, so they're gonna get it. Yeah.
Do you feel like it's hard to build a reputation and a career when you start to, because as a young woman who can do a plausible British accent, I actually book a lot of young adult fiction and children's literature as well as romance and steamier stuff. And I don't want those kids to be listening to something and go, everybody has access to the internet. And so I'm just curious, what your advice would be in terms of growing both of those paths simultaneously. How much do you let them cross over? I mean, I remember a couple years ago I came here to listen to Katie Kellgren talk, and she was saying she does a lot of kid stuff, and she started with bodice rippers, and how do you,
It's basically up to you, but I agree with you. It should be two distinct paths if you're going to use a pseudonym, and you're going to have that two-career thing. There are many folks that are okay by okay I mean work-wise in the general fiction, but are really huge in the erotica, where they don't want it to cross over. They don't really get the work that way. So you might as well cultivate both, or whatever the strength is. And if you don't want your name Googled or used or be associated with that, then you use a pseudonym.
You just grow them separately.
I would grow them separately. Why not? More poles in the water, right?
Cool.
I mean, you definitely want that.
Yeah.
It's more and more common, and I think it's a really smart question as a young woman who has a great career in front of her to be asking now, rather than in 5 years going, oh gosh, I wish I would have done that book under a pseudonym because now people are Googling me.
Well, and that's hard too, because some of them, I've narrated some historical fiction that's gone real steamy in one chapter, and it's sort of, where do you draw that line? I don't know. Figure it out project by project, I guess.
We have authors who will request narrators by their pseudonym and who only know the narrator by their pseudonym. Right. I really want, this narrator, and we're going, that's not a real person, but we know who it is. And I think so a lot of pseudonyms have their own followings as well, both amongst our authors and our listeners.
And I think if you're doing a historical fiction and all of a sudden one scene comes in, you'll be okay. I mean, no, you know what I mean? It's not going to ruin your career.
Okay.
It's understood. Yes, in the back. Oh. Yeah.
And when it comes to choosing a pseudonym, we have the internet, Google at our,
There you go.
All I did was I went on Google and tried a couple names. I didn't want to take somebody else's name, so I found one that nobody had.
That is an excellent point. Thank you for bringing that up, because we have in the past have actors choose names that are actually other actors. And then it not only gets weird, but confusing as well. So if it's like a realtor in Paluca, Kansas, totally fine. But you don't want to be Meryl Streep. That's true. The third. Yeah, another question up here.
It's kind of I guess a mute question, but what if you have a distinctive voice? Have you had actors that have distinctive voices being able to have a pseudonym and still have a successful career in the regular field?
Yeah, absolutely. Occasionally, narrators will get called out for their pseudonym. It's only happened maybe once or twice that I know of. If you do have a distinctive voice, it's a possibility. If it's something that terrifies you, maybe stay away from that material. But otherwise, I don't think our listeners really mind that much. I mean, I think they get that authors have pen names and narrators have pseudonyms.
And don't forget, it's two different markets when you're out there, right? The people listening to maybe a bodice ripper all the time may not listen to you and don't even know who you are. You know what I mean? I know where you're coming from your point of view, and we do have folks that are concerned. I have a fan base; they'll recognize my name. Okay, but sometimes they won't because it's two distinct markets that the folks are listening.
I think all of this goes also to speak to political content, and it's not something we all think about all the time, but we have had a couple of books that are very far one way or the other on the spectrum where narrators have said, I'm happy to do this, I just would rather not use my real name. And again, totally fine. No producer that I know would ever hold that against anyone, especially if they're doing a good job. And we know if you're taking the project, you're going to do a good job on it as a professional. How to handle uncomfortable scenes delicately. This is always an interesting one. Someone in our panel last year said, what do you do when you have a really weird phrase, like that you don't know what it means? And the narrator I was speaking with said, "We'll go to Urban Dictionary and look it up." And she said, "You'll be surprised what you can learn." So these things happen. There are going to be things that happen that are hilarious in your book. Whether it's a scene that's just really graphic and something happens and you get the giggles, or if it's something that you're like, wow, I can't believe that, who would that ever happen to? That's not a thing that would happen in real life. But there are things that happen in books that are going to make you laugh. So what do? You stop and you laugh about it. And if it's really good, you can maybe call a friend. I have a narrator who sends me texts from the booth. "You'll never believe what I just had to read. It was this line." And occasionally I'll get the sound clip, which is really good. My husband likes to listen to those. He's like, "I can't believe that." But take a break, giggle about it, laugh about it, and then let it go and be done with it. And just kind of go back to the book as normal. Ellen, do you want to talk about that a little bit from the actor's perspective? What do you do when you get
afraid? Is it sort of the giggles or what we?
Yeah, if you get a scene that's really explicit, or if there's a word or a phrase that you trip over.
Well, if I have a section which is very difficult to say, and it does happen, I just had that in a book I just did recently. I could not get it out. I must have done it like 10 times. Sometimes I'll build the word from the back forwards. Does that make sense? Like I'll say the end, and then I'll say the next syllable in the end, and then the third syllable in the end, and I'll just get it until I get that word. And then I'll say a couple of words before that so that it's in there. And it really, weirdly, that really does help. Sometimes it's that you've been in the booth too long, and you need to just get up and shake it off, even if you're on a deadline. You just need to stand up, get a drink of water, just shake it out. The stuff about the giggles is a little bit, I don't know if that bothers you when you're recording by yourself. It's very hard when you have a producer and a director who are standing there waiting for you to stop laughing. And that happened to me not that long ago, and it was just, we all started laughing, thank God. But it was really not even funny. Like, it was not even a funny word. But that does happen. The thing that it also really, like going along with what Kat said, it's very important that you understand what you're reading. So don't gloss over it. If you've just read a sentence and it really made no sense to you, we're all gonna hear that. So it's worth taking the time to look it up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Any questions about that stuff before we move on? Yes.
One thing that I came across one time is that I was reading a book, and the content I had no problem with, but in several scenes he used a rather sensitive derogatory word. Now, he is not from the United States, and from where he's from, it's not even what he was using to describe what we would be describing. It was a complete dystopian world. It was different things with completely different meanings affixed to these words. And so I was like, do you realize what that means here? And he's like, yeah, and my editor stopped me and asked me about it, but it's not what I intended, and I really want to use this word. However, I am particularly close to the communities that would be affected by the term. So like a situation like that, I kind of just said okay and danced around it and tried to pronounce it as as oddly as possible so that it would sound completely as unlike the word as possible. But even then, I'm like, I still don't feel terribly comfortable with what I did, in spite of the fact that I respected the rest of the book. How would you handle a situation like that?
I would say to approach it from the viewpoint of a character. Either it's a character in the book who's saying it, or just take on the character of the author if it's part of the narration or if it's a nonfiction. And remember that it's not necessarily you saying that, you're just giving voice to someone else's words. I know that doesn't solve the problem, but hopefully that makes it a little bit easier.
Mispronouncing it. Sorry. I know what you're talking about. I did one time a really far right-wing book a long time ago, and I was tempted to do what you said, just to be like, or show, throw some shade vocally. It doesn't work, it doesn't, because the people who are going to buy that book are going to have that viewpoint, and they want to hear a fair representation. It's your job as a narrator to pronounce it correctly and to be convicted. And again, it's all about choice. There's a lot of titles out there. If you come across stuff that offends you, it's like, you don't have to do it. You really don't. But if you do it, you have to be 100%.
Excellent. All right. Oh, a couple more questions. Okay.
Just on that note, when is it too late if you realize that a title might not be right for you? Like if you didn't, like I did a title that I didn't probably do as much research as I should have. And once I'd accepted it, I found out that it's first person Australian, Western Australia. And
No, I can see that, actually.
But and I teach dialect, so it wasn't super horrible, but it's not authentic, and for 7 hours, it's kind of torture, I imagine.
I mean, you look Australian.
I mean, after you've accepted it, is there a point if you get that far in the book that you say, you know what, I think maybe I was a little hasty and I should have declined this offer?
Yes.
Gracefully?
I think you should be honest, and
Yeah,
I don't
I
know if
think
there's
as
an exact
producers-
point, but it's certainly the point you realize that it's
Right.
not going,
Right.
I think as producers, we'd always rather hear the honest truth about it before you start the book, rather than you get to the end and go, I don't think I did a really great job on that. Maybe you should find somebody else. So I think after you've accepted the book and you've read the whole thing, maybe to say to a rights holder, I might not be the best choice for this book. I really want this to be the best audiobook that it can be. I'm so sorry, but I think I'm going to have to turn this down. I think that a rights holder would respect that more than you doing a fair to middling job on the
Right.
book.
Yeah.
and maybe recommend someone who is a narrator with those strengths.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean,
I
I
mean, it
would
was
certainly want to
definitely-
give that, say, I'm not right for it, but I've listened to so-and-so, or this person has that skill set. This way you're at least providing some kind of help answer.
Right. Cool. Yeah, it was definitely in the prepping stage that I realized.
Well, that's
And
good.
then They encouraged me to do it, so I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot.
Well, it's just good it wasn't the last line of the book.
Yeah, that would be bad.
He said in his Irish brogue. We have a question over here?
It more went back to sort of like the difficult material, but since erotica is so popular in dealing with like those scenes, what's a good sort of like how steamy is too steamy versus too dry and not doing the material justice? Is there like a good example or like out there that like this person does erotica really well and sort of balances the line on really conveying what's happening without it sounding like a porno?
I would listen to
Mike?
Ellen. I think she does a great job with erotica and with romance, and but again, I think it's subtlety, right? You don't want to be like, hey, she said, you don't want to get all like crazy, over exaggerating anything. You know what I mean? Especially in the narration, the storytelling part of it, or even in the dialogue. But I mean, how do you approach it? I mean, it's subtle, right? I mean,
It's definitely very subtle. I know sometimes when you're reading it, it sounds like you should be doing all those grunts and groans and that kind of thing. But it is, and you have to do them, clearly. But when I've had to do them, I don't do I haven't done the erotica under my real name. And I'm not telling you what my pseudonym is. Yeah. But you're at an advantage doing it alone in your booth, because when I used to do them, I had an engineer. I think Mike was one of my, long time ago. It was like, you want to have lunch? So, but you can't. But again, it's the same thing. Like even if it makes you feel weird and uncomfortable, you still have to do them. And I think to throw yourself, I do less is more is always my motto. But you still have to kind of be committed to so you have to really throw yourself into that. And then go take a cold shower.
All right. You have a question here, and then we have one here.
Kind of going back to what that gentleman said up there, if the rights holder hears your audition of that particular character using that particular accent, and they feel, well, that's fine. I want you to do the book anyway. Yes, it might be 7 hours of torture because you have to keep that same level of intensity and energy throughout the entire narration. But if that's what the rights holder wants you to do, then by all means, you're the right person in their mind to do that particular book. I've had authors offer me books playing African Americans, and I can't do that voice. He thought it was going to be funny if I played it that way.
but again, that's an uneducated ear, and the rights holders are not always audio professionals.
Right,
And I would seriously take this gentleman's tact and be honest, true to yourself, and be honest. Even if they think you're the greatest thing and you're doing this great African-American accent, and you know it's crap, I would back out. I really would.
Well, exactly. You mean you have the option to do that because ultimately
Yes.
you are putting the stamp on that work that people are
Absolutely.
going to hear.
Right.
And you, as the narrator, obviously have to go and give your best performance. But there may be that certain circumstance where the rights holder says, you know what, I want you to do this. And regardless.
But that's what right. It's your career. It's your name on this thing, you know. And whether they love it or not, I mean, you know, you got to go with it. What's right.
Yeah, I think as an actor and as a professional, it's your duty to yourself and to the material and to your career to be able to say, that's really flattering, but I'm not okay with this. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't think I'm the right person. All right, we've got a question up front.
Just real quick, somebody was talking about erotica earlier and how to do those steamy scenes and what to do. And my thought process on this, as someone who's also done it under a pseudonym that I won't give away, one of the things I've learned is, particularly on ACX, that scripts aren't always put up that reflect the final script. So somebody will post an audition script with no erotica in it. And in that case, you really either want to contact the author and ask them to post a steamy scene. I just find it's helpful to go into an erotica with the author knowing kind of what it's going to sound like in doing a steamy scene. So if that helps you figure out as to how far to go with your scenes, at least it gives the rights holder an idea of where you're going to be.
That's good
I think
advice.
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And we've had authors come to us and say, hey, I really love this narrator, but I've never heard them do a steamy scene. Can you send them, you know, pages 36 and 37 of my book and ask them to read it just so I can get an idea? We have about 2 minutes left, 3 minutes left. We have this great headshot of Ellen, so I'm glad that we got there. So I don't want to cut off questions, but I do want to give Ellen a few minutes just to talk about anything that maybe, you know, we didn't cover that you feel is really important to talk about as an actor.
I felt like I talked for a half an hour, so I don't know if I have anything more to say. I just wanted to, last couple of things that were said, I just want to say that you're all building a career. And the stuff that you put out there is forever. Anybody can listen to it at any time. I think you're also rated, right, on ACX, and you will be also on audible.com when they do, you know, and you can get slammed in reviews if you do a bad job. So I just would really encourage you to have a lot of integrity about your work. And as an actor, I cannot tell you how much it helped, all those years of acting classes, all those years of singing, knowing how to take care of my voice, knowing how to use my voice in a multitude of ways to, you know, to get an idea across. I don't speak in a monotone. I don't sort of use the same old tricks every single time. That's all stuff that you should be doing, like on top of all the work you're doing in your studio. You just really need to be constantly learning. Even if you really feel like you're super good and you're better than everybody else, or you really have it down, nobody really does. I don't. And most of my colleagues who work very hard in this industry and are very well awarded are still learning. And you need to do that too, as my recommendation, if you want to have a long career. And the other thing that they've just been touching on, which I can't agree with enough, is that is just be careful what you take. I know you're hungry, and I know everybody wants to get titles and put money on the table, but it'll come back and bite you in the ass if you take stuff that is not right for you or that you're not ready for. It really will. And you're all about building a long career. You all want that. And you're all about being respected. Because the more whatever the rating system is, the better reviews, people are going to see that and they're going to seek you out. You're going to get the ear of someone like Mike who respects, and Kat who respect hard work, who see your improvement, who see the kind of the investment that you have in your work. And I also think, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I think if you have access to acting classes or improv, that's stuff to take. I swear it's really worth it. And singing is actually kind of worth it. I think the other thing that I also am very careful about is vocally, just making sure that I'm taking care of myself. Like If I have a concert the night before, I try not to schedule a session the day afterwards because my voice is going to be in a really different place. You should, since you're engineering yourself, should be aware of that too. That if you're, you should be playing samples from the last time you recorded to make sure that it's matching up. And if you're sick at the time, maybe wait a few days or see if you can vocally bring it up. Find exercises to do to get your voice more solid. And I'll just end by saying, just saying again to you that just get invested in the characters. Try not to judge the work. I know some of it is really bad, and some of it is not that interesting. But it's not for you to judge. It's for you to do the best possible job you can.